People keep asking me the same thing over and over again. Hey mate, can't you just paint it all at once? And every time I smile. Sure, if you don't care about depth, light and emotion. But that's now how real painting works. Now, let me take you where it all began, our backyard. The roses were in full bloom, just begging to be painted. So I did what any artist would do. I grabbed the scissors and snipped one off. But, as always, in the end, everything beautiful somehow ends up in my wife's hands. I mean, I just borrowed the rose, she owns the rights. In this video, I'll show you why we use underpainting, how color layers work, and how to build a classical painting step by step. Once you get it, you'll never look at the finished painting the same way again. I guarantee that. Excited? Let's dive in.
So it all started with a rose, one I borrowed from my lovely wife's garden. I set it up under the lighting that worked best for me and took a reference photo. As I mentioned earlier, the first layer we're applying is the gray underpainting, sometimes referred to as the dead layer. But what exactly is its purpose? Why start everything in gray? The dead layer serves several important roles. First, its optical function. Underpaintings often remain visible, at least partially, beneath the upper layers of paint. They influence the final appearance by adding a warm or cool undertone that subtly enhances the color applied on top. Through this layering method, you can achieve effects that are simply not possible with direct painting. In most cases, gray underpainting becomes most noticeable in the shadow areas or the halftones, depending on the technique used. Sometimes it's painted over entirely and disappears in the final result. Other times, it remains visible and even replaces the local color of the subject. Traditionally in classical oil painting, halftone areas, where the light gradually turns into shadow, are cooler and less saturated than both the lights and the shadows. That's exactly where the gray underpainting shines. Its role here is to optically lower the saturation and temperature in those transitional areas. This can be done by allowing the underpainting to remain partially visible or by covering it with a thin, transparent layer of color. When it shows through the paint, it naturally cools and tones down the saturation in line with classical painting principles. So the gray layer isn't just a base, it actively shapes the atmosphere and depth of the final image. Secondly, building texture and volume. Oil paints vary in covering strength depending on the pigment and binder used. Some are perfect for thin glazes, while others are better suited for thick impasto application. But here's the issue. Sometimes you need to apply a thick highlight, and the paint you're using just doesn't cover well. That's when another role of the gray underpainting comes into play: texture creation. Grisaille, used as a preparatory base layer, gives body to the colors layered over it. Historically, these textured gray layers were often built up using lead white, one of the best pigments for underpainting due to its density and opacity. These heavier strokes of paint rising from the surface also help enhance the composition by strengthening the sense of perspective. In other words, they support the illusion of three-dimensional form on a flat canvas. The most important role of single-color underpainting is to establish values and define the tonal structure of the future painting. Using one unified hue, it maps out lights and shadows and organizes the entire composition at its foundation. In this stage, color, saturation, and temperature are deliberately left out of the equation. What's defined in the underpainting is then mechanically reinforced in the upper layers. Unlike direct painting, where color and value are addressed at the same time, this approach splits the process into stages. Yes, the layering may seem long and complicated, but its real purpose is to make things simpler. It breaks the painting into manageable steps, allowing for more control, clarity, and precision. If you'd like to learn more about gray underpainting, be sure to watch the full uncut video available for free on my YouTube channel. It's about 20 minutes long and takes you step by step through the entire grisaille process, from start to finish. And if you're serious about mastering the dead layer technique and want to take your skills to the next level, I highly recommend my booklet available on Amazon. It's a concise, focused guide, not a full-length book, but the insights it offers can't be found in any other publication on classical gray underpainting. If your goal is to become a true dead layer master, this booklet is the place to start. You'll find the link to both the video and the booklet in the description below. Once the grayer is dry, it's finally time to move on to the first layer of color. Before my brush even touches the canvas, I spend a solid 20 minutes just premixing the colors. This step is absolutely essential. It lays the groundwork for everything that follows. During this phase, I decide what the dominant color of the rose will be. It's a decision I commit to early on, and it guides me through the entire painting process. To give myself more flexibility, I mix a wide range of tones. I almost always begin with what's known as the local color. In this case, it's a cool pink. But I don't stop there. I also prepare cooler variations, especially for the halftone areas that lean toward a colder light source. This careful preparation helps me capture the subtle transitions between light and shadow with accuracy. I also mix deeper, warmer tones for the shadowed areas. These have a reddish undertone and stand apart from the base color. This variety adds richness to the surface and allows for more layered depth in the final painting. Still, no matter how much prep I do, painting remains a fluid, living process. As I work, I keep adjusting the mixes, tweaking the saturation, shifting the values, even modifying the temperature, to better respond to the needs of the composition as it evolves. This kind of dynamic approach keeps the process engaging and helps ensure that the final image is a balanced mix of careful planning and spontaneous expression. Each part of my painting already has a specific value set by the gray underpainting. So when I begin applying color, I'm not reinventing the structure, I'm reinforcing it. My job now is to make sure every hue I place aligns with the value already established underneath. Put simply, the color I'm laying down is either as dark as or exactly matches the value of that gray foundation. To do this well, you need a strong sense of value, just like when you're shading a drawing in charcoal. As I begin laying down the very first layer of color, I'm intentional about one thing: not putting on too much paint. That's not hesitation, it's strategy. You see, the volume and texture I'm aiming for have already been set in the gray underpainting, and that's exactly what that first layer is meant to do. The rule I follow at this stage is entirely shaped by the tonal values already there. So here's how it works. In the light areas, I'll go just a half tone lighter than the gray base. In the shadows, I shift the color a little darker than what's underneath. It's a subtle approach, but it allows me to stretch the value scale gradually, giving me more contrast and clarity than the gray layer alone could offer. And yes, I'll keep building on this in the following layers, but we'll get to that later. Right now, my main focus is to capture the true local color of what I'm painting. Nothing fancy, just honest color. For shadows, I pick darker, more transparent hues. This way they don't overpower the painting, they reveal what's beneath. It's the same method I used in the grisaille, and because of that, in those deep shadows, you'll notice a warm undertone shining softly through from the imprimatura. That little warmth, it brings the cool tones to life, gives them character. To keep that effect intact, I apply paint thinly in those areas, because the last thing I want is to bury that glow under too much pigment. Those warm undertones, they're not just pretty, they hold the whole painting together. If you're wondering how I mix my colors, well, there's one thing I always emphasize no matter where or when. Color begins with light. Light is the source of color harmony. It shapes how colors appear and how we perceive them. If you want to master mixing any color, this one or that one, you first need to understand at least the basic principles of light. And once you do, mixing colors actually becomes quite simple, even if at the beginning it might seem the opposite. And that's exactly why I'd like to recommend my book Color, also available on Amazon. Inside, you'll find everything you need to know. Everything I've learned about color over the past 20 years of painting is condensed into this one guide. If you take the time to read it, you won't be left with any gaps when it comes to mixing paint. Trust me, this book will help you mix colors like a pro. To finish off this stage, I paint the background and the tabletop, which in this case I've replaced with a wooden tree stump where the flower originally rested. Once that's done, I let the first layer of color dry for several days. This gives the surface enough time to fully set, so I can be absolutely sure the painting will be ready for the next application of color. All right, so why am I adding another layer of paint here? Well, once the first layer dries, the colors tend to lose a little bit of their punch. That's normal. Oil paint is slightly transparent, and the gray underpainting underneath begins to show through, just enough to mute the surface a bit. But you know what? That's totally fine. In fact, that's the beauty of layered painting. We actually want that soft toned down effect, and here's why. This second layer is where I start turning up the volume. The colors I'm using now, they're a step, sometimes 2 steps, more saturated than before. And here's the trick. I don't cover everything, not completely. In the halftones like cheeks, soft folds, delicate edges, I let some of the previous, slightly muted colors peek through. That subtle layering creates contrast, and with it, depth and form. You might recognize this classic principle from traditional realism: warm lights, cool halftones, warm shadows. That cooler grayish tone, that's what helps me nail those cooler halftones. It mimics where light starts to fade and helps shape the form in a natural, believable way. Just like before, I allow some of that gray to shine through, especially in those soft transitions. But now, I'm working more precisely. Smaller sections, more attention to detail, refining edges, honing in on shape. That said, I'm not too rigid about it. Some areas get more paint, some let more of the underpainting show. It really depends on what that specific part of the painting needs. The rule is there, but I let the painting lead the way. When I move on to the second color layer, it's all about one thing: more light and more color. Wherever sunlight kisses those petals, I dial up a richer, warmer pink, brighter, more alive than what sat in the underpainting. And the shadows, they go deeper too. I reach for more saturated tones, warmer, heavier, full of presence. What I love about this process is how systematic it is, in both hue and value. My first pass is always muted. Underpaintings never stretch the full value range. The highlights are quiet, the shadows still soft and light. Then, layer by layer, I build on top of that. Lighter paints go into the illuminated areas. Darker paints settle into the depths. It's a logical ascent, a journey upward through each translucent glaze. Of course, it doesn't always go perfectly. Sometimes you need to go back, darken a light spot, adjust a tone, but I try to follow this path as closely as I can, and here's where the real magic happens. When I paint a single petal, I lay in bright, vivid color for the light and the shadow, but I let that quieter underlayer peek through in the midtones. Right at the border between light and dark, you get that moment I've been talking about, a cooler, less intense hue, a natural transition. That's the timeless oil painting principle: warm lights, cool halftones, warm shadows. And it applies to color too. By placing rich, saturated strokes over more subdued ones, I deepen the painting's chromatic richness. Those vivid shadows, they dissolve into gentle tones, creating optical effects you simply can't achieve with a single layer approach. In this second color layer, I'm deepening the hues and sculpting the form, gently starting to suggest the delicate textures of the petals. But I'm careful not to rush. The richest details, the fine textures, the shimmering highlights, those are reserved for the final layers. Now, speaking of texture, every flower tells a story in the way its petals unfold. The large outer petals, they opened first, facing the wind, the sun, the rain, weathered and slightly rough, marked by tiny imperfections, gracefully wearing their scars. In contrast, deep inside the blossom, the inner petals remain untouched, youthful, vibrant, radiating with saturated color, their surface still smooth, still soft, still full of promise. As you can see, painting flowers isn't just about color, it's about balance, the harmony between contrast and unity, between light and shadow, between what's fragile and what's resilient. This whole process is a journey, a quiet movement toward elegance, hidden within the diversity of form and hue. And now, after the second layer has fully dried, with the colors balanced and the depth improved, I'm finally ready to dive into the fine details. It's been about 3 weeks, and I'm back at the easel starting on the third color layer for the flower. The tabletop, for now, still has only one. But here's the thing. There's no hard rule about how many layers each part of your painting needs. Sometimes 2 layers are all it takes to fully capture the essence of a flower or a portrait. Other times you'll find you need to go further, add a bit more. The goal isn't to make the layer count the same everywhere. The real question is, does this part of the painting look the way I imagined it? Take the background, for instance. I painted it in just 1 layer, and it already does exactly what I wanted it to do. It's vibrant, alive, and just right. No need to go further there. Now, the tabletop, that still has just a single layer, but I'll be adding another one to deepen its color and bring out more texture. The highlights and reflections, they're already sitting in their third layer, and once that dries, I'll come back for the finishing touch. Those tiny, detailed water droplets. So here's what I've learned. Don't get stuck on counting layers. Add as many as the painting asks for. Personally, I tend to finish most pieces around the 4th layer, especially when it comes to those last subtle details, like a single drop of water resting gently on a petal. All right, moving on to the next layer of paint on the stone table. This time I'm going in with slightly brighter, more saturated tones compared to the first layer. The local color of the stone is a neutral gray, and in that first pass, I focused mostly on getting the temperature differences right. The top of the table, where light hits, has a slightly warmer tone than the angled surface facing the viewer. But here's where it gets interesting. On that front-facing plane, you can still spot some warm undertones, especially near the bottom. Why? Because in the first layer, I purposely left parts of the imprimatura exposed. That warm underpainting still shines through in just the right places, and it adds real depth and richness. This whole illusion, it's created by letting the cooler paint on top interact with those glowing, warm undertones beneath. That's the magic of layered painting. It's not just about what's on the surface, it's about what's happening beneath it too. And since I'm also building up texture in this second layer, I'm applying the paint in thicker strokes. This helps simulate the rough, natural surface of real stone. Here, I'm painting tiny drops of water, not from a photo, but straight from imagination. Each one is shaped by the surface it touches. Some rest calmly on flat petals, almost perfectly round. Others stretch and slide, dripping gently from the flower's edge. A few hang by a thread, ready to fall softly onto the tabletop, which, yes, has a few drops of its own. Every drop is different, and that's the point. No 2 moments are ever the same. So why should any painting be? Every droplet casts a shadow, and that's exactly where I always start. I take a slightly darker version of the local color, the same tone I used for the rose's shadows. And then on the opposite side of that cast shadow, where the light touches the droplet, you'll usually find a soft, dark edge as well. I gently suggest that too. Then comes the glow up. I mix a warm tone, something in the family of yellow, red, and when I use it to paint the lit side of the droplet, right where the light hits hardest, there's a crisp little highlight, a tiny, tiny flash of reflected brilliance. A bit of that light gets pulled into the droplet too, which makes the edge near the shadow almost glow like it's holding a secret. Once the colors are down, I blended the transitions inside the droplet using a dry brush, just enough to smooth things out without losing the shape. But there's one thing I keep razor sharp: the highlight. A bright pinpoint dot that brings the droplet to life. It's like the sparkle in someone's eye. Small, but everything hinges on it. Most of the time I stick to warm tones, but when a droplet sits in the shade, tucked beneath a leaf, or hidden from the main light, I add a whisper of cool blue to tone it down. Makes it feel a bit more mysterious, like it's minding its own business back there in the quiet. Once all the final details are complete, the very last step is the artist's signature. I usually paint it to look like it's carved into a stone slab. I try to make sure the signature blends in with the painting's color palette so it doesn't feel distracting. Even if it's not immediately noticeable, anyone who truly connects with the painting will find it. And if someone doesn't like the painting, well, let's just say they won't instantly know who made it. After that, it's time for the final protective layer, varnish. For layered oil paintings, I always use a classic glossy Damar varnish. It deepens the colors and brings the whole surface together with a unified shine. I apply it only after the painting has rested in the studio for at least 6 months to make sure the oil has fully dried. Once varnished, I let the painting sit flat for at least a day so the varnish can dry evenly. To prevent dust from settling on the surface, I cover it with a firm paperboard or anything solid that won't touch the wet varnish but still acts as a shield. That's it for now, my mates. If you're craving more, I've got something special cooking over on my Patreon. There's a full 1 hour and 30-minute version of this video waiting for you, packed with way more juicy insights and deep dive painting techniques. All that for just $10. For that ridiculously small amount, you'll learn more about layering than in pretty much any other video out there. And if you sign up for one of my tiers, you'll also unlock exclusive tutorials, detailed breakdowns of my layering methods, behind-the-scenes content, and all kinds of extra painterly goodness. The Patreon link is right below in the video description. And if Patreon isn't a thing, you can also join my YouTube community right here by clicking the join button. And hey, if you're a fan of my artwork and want to rock some cool prints, stickers, or other awesome merch, swing by my website at mademerge.com. Don't forget to use the discount code IMADESELLED at checkout to snag 10% off your entire order. Take care, friends, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.